Please welcome back Paul Noglows, and joining him, Anna Haldewang, Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Plan B, Ellie Symes, Chief Executive Officer, the B Corp, and Stuart Woolf, President and Chief Executive Officer, Woolf Farming and Processing.
Okay, well, we made it. So we made it to the last conversation of the day. And no offense to our earlier speakers, but we do try to save the best for last. And if not the best, at least the most fun. So at Forbes, we're really excited. Each AgTech Summit, we try to bring in a new element and something that maybe we hadn't talked about in previous summits. So 2 years ago, we introduced cannabis on the West Coast. It was very timely, very topical. This past June, we introduced blockchain and how it was being used with vineyards. Earlier today, you heard about animal health, which is also a new area for us. And we're going to close this one out with a new area for us. And it's basically bees, healthy bees, and pollination. I'm really excited for this conversation. These folks can handle the whole thing for me. I can sit here and just let them go. But I thought what we would do is we would have Anna and Ellie tell us about their startups, tell us about how they got involved with bees and pollination, and then we're going to turn it over to Stuart Woolf, who uses bees extensively in his almond growing operations on the West Coast. So with that, and then we'll get into Q&A, and we'll really talk about the subject. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Anna, if you can tell us a little bit about your company and about yourself.
Thank you, Paul. So Plan B is an autonomous pollinating drone. It's not designed to replace bees, but simply lend a helping hand and provide extra security to growers. So for example, say it's a cold day out on your orchard and the bees are inside, blossoms still need to be pollinated, so Plan B would be able to assist in that process. Or for example, say the crop is further away from the hive where there may be less pollination, as less activity from the bees, Plan B would be able to assist in this process. So how I got started, I graduated from Savannah College of Art and Design a year ago, and while there I majored in product design, and my professor assigned us to create a self-sufficient object that stimulates the growth of plants. So I started researching the basic needs of plants and came across pollination and learned about the decline of bees and knew I wanted to bring a product that raises awareness to this issue. So after the class ended, I did get a B in a class, by the way, I did not get an A. And after the class ended, I started doing more and more research into it and realized how great this product would be for agriculture as a whole, making a positive impact not only on growers, but bees as well.
So Anna, you presented yesterday out at Beck's. For people who didn't get to do the field demos, what is it? Is it basically a drone pollinator, or kind of what is the offering?
So I cannot say too much on the pollinating method at this time, but yesterday we had a very heavy focus on the camera side of it and the autonomy as a really critical piece to the artificial intelligence. I will say, as far as the pollination side, it's very similar to how a bee pollinates. But the difference between Plan B and a honeybee is honeybees do not know how to cross-pollinate. So it's all a happy accident, whereas Plan B will be very precise in this method and be able to go from flower A to flower B every single time.
Great. Ellie, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've started?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, Paul. So these beehives that growers like Stuart rent are actually priced based on the size of the hive. Now, the only way to tell the size of the hive is to actually manually open the hive, count the frames that look like they have bees on it, write it down on paper, and add that up later and average it. So the B Corp, we came up with an infrared solution where we can actually take a photo of the hive, and we've automated the data analysis so we can turn around the actual frame strength, which is the number of bees in the hive, back to the grower. This is important because when you're opening that hive, it's invasive. It's going to piss off your beekeeper. It's also going to stress the bees out, and you can lose pollination time. So it's non-invasive, taking an image. In addition, it's a lot faster, which is important in an age where labor is key. So we started our company about 2.5 years ago. I had originally gotten into bees, also don't have an ag background. I volunteered with a beekeeper, fell in love, came back to my university, IU. No chairs, we got too many. Yes!
It's a tough crowd.
Thanks, guys. And I thought, you know, this isn't an ag school. Maybe other students that are studying computer science or business might want to be exposed to agriculture. And IU should have bees to show them that, because we need all kinds of disciplines in ag. So the university gave me a grant to start a beekeeping program, and that ended up turning into a club. There's a bunch of 18 to 21-year-olds that love bees. So it grew in success pretty quickly, and some folks at the university pulled me aside and said, "We love what you've done with the club, but we want you to dream bigger, and we want to help you." And so we came back to them 2 weeks later with the business model that it's not what we're doing today, but they've really helped us get started.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So Stuart, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you use bees, and why you were good enough to come out here, besides the fact that our sons are fraternity brothers.
Well, okay. First question, though, I have is for Ellie, because you said when you were working around these bees, you fell in love. It wasn't with the beekeeper, was it? Okay, good.
A little out of my age range.
So just a little background. In California right now, so we grow almonds, pistachios, wine grapes, processing tomatoes, onion, garlic, some other crops. But almonds is really our primary crop. And right now in the state, in total, there's about 8.5 million acres, irrigated acres, being farmed in California. Almonds represent about 1.3 million. So, you know, there's 350, 400 different crops. So this is a big crop for us. Of those acres, 1 million are in production. This year, the state will produce about 2.45 billion pounds. So for the growers out there, it's about a $6 to $7 billion industry that without bees, you wouldn't be growing these things commercially. So it's a really, really important thing for us.
Great. And how can you talk to us a little bit about how you use them? And just in terms of how many bees you use,
Yeah.
when you bring them in, how you bring them in?
So we work with a couple different bee guys that will go out, and our team will interview these guys. They want to make sure they get good, clean hives and what have you. And just what Ellie said, we do pay basis the number of frames in a hive. So we do go out and open up the hives and look to see how many, of those slats are full of bees. Now, you said the beekeeper is kind of uptight. I know I'm uptight when they open up the hives and all the bees are flying around. But nevertheless, so we get them from a couple different suppliers. This year on our ranch, we have about 9,000 acres of almonds. We'll be using about $4 million worth of bees. Okay, so the hives will come in for about 6 weeks. And, it took coming to Indianapolis to this event to find out that I've been ordering too many hives. Ellie tells me the average is 2. We've been using about 2.5. So for us, it's about
2.5 per acre?
per acre.
Okay.
So it's about $500 an acre for a grower.
Okay. Wow. I read a lot, and I think a lot of people, it seemed to me, I don't know, about maybe 2 years ago, you were seeing a lot of press and a lot of media kind of on the bee crisis, and that, some of them painted a very dire picture that some types of bees might be on their way to extinction. Where are we in terms of the crisis? Was it a true crisis? Is it a true crisis? And just kind of how are things looking?
So we're actually at a 20-year high in honeybee populations. That's not the peak populations we've had in the U.S. It is harder than ever to keep bees. And the price for bees for growers is higher because of it. Because beekeepers are having to put a lot more money in those hives to keep them alive. They figured out some of the problems, but it's costing them money and time. I think where the real crisis is some of those native pollinators, which would help Stuart and other growers out if there was more of them, but there's not an industry around them. Honeybees are a livestock product, but your bumblebees, your carpenter bees are not. So I think there should be some efforts in habitat for pollinators that could help, because that is a real issue.
And Stuart, you're bringing most of your bees in out of state?
Yes, most of them come out of state.
And why?
Well, our guys, their theory is there's so many bees in California during pollination that you get every form of disease and whatever that's in the bee population. And hives that are kept out of state, that Wyoming, Idaho, wherever, our guys think we'll probably get higher quality bees from those regions than the ones that are staying in the state.
So was there a crisis, or was it more kind of a media creation?
Do you want to talk to CCD?
Yeah. So colony collapse disorder was in 2007, and we haven't seen that since then. There's saying decline of the bees and colony collapse disorder is a very catchy title. And let's face it, black and yellow bees, they're pretty cute. So in that way, people are really able to capture emotions and be able to tell this story and draw attention to this issue. But it's not as big as an issue as people think. There isn't one main problem affecting bees. It's multiple factors: nutrition, management, pesticides, diseases, parasites, and transportation.
And so you say you hit on transportation last, but how far can bees be transported, or how well do they travel? And when you say you're bringing bees in from out of state, out of California, are they coming from Indiana, or are they coming from Nevada? Like, is it nearby, or is it?
They go as far as Florida.
Is what?
They come from as far as Florida, go all the way across the country. We haven't done bees on a plane yet, like snakes on a plane, but yeah, they're getting shipped on flatbed trucks all over the country. Yeah.
And how do they hold up?
I think it's stressful for them. Yeah.
Well, I don't know the difference between a stressful bee and a happy bee, but they're moving them at night when it's cold and the bees are in their hives. And at least the trucks that I see coming to our ranch, they have nettings and what have you over them. And I would say this, that during the spring, when they actually show up and they wake up in the morning and see billions of almond blossoms, it's got to be pretty exciting for the bees.
Yeah, and a lot of beekeepers will take them out during this time period because pollen is a very high source of protein. So sometimes beekeepers will come back with even stronger hives than when they took them over. But some of the issues, going back with the stresses of transportation, especially when bees are stressed out, that can also cause more attraction towards diseases and parasites. And so California, for example, is, especially with 80% of the world's almonds are grown there, they're maxed out at the amount of hives that they can have in that area. So that's why beekeepers who load hundreds of thousands of hives on these trucks then truck them over there to pollinate during this time. But it doesn't just end there. They'll then go from the almonds over to, say, Georgia and pollinate watermelons, and they'll go up to Maine and do the blueberries, and then move over to the Midwest and do the melons and the apples and the cranberries over in Wisconsin.
So these bees really get around. They go all over
Big
the
time
U.S.,
travel.
I
Canada.
like to say they're frequent flyers.
Okay,
I got
very
all the
good.
puns.
Very good.
That's great.
So I want
It's the end of the day.
I want to open this up to questions. I'm not sure how many of you got to see the bee hive out in the Innovation Showcase, but it was pretty cool. And after this, if you're on your way to the reception, are the bees still there?
Yeah, they're out there.
Terrific.
They're sealed. It's okay.
Yeah, we had some people who were a little afraid of the bees, but there seems to be nothing to fear. Why don't we open it up to questions, and then we'll take it from there. Any questions? Come on, you guys can't all be experts on bees. Let's.
They're scary. We're not.
You're saying how you take pictures of the bees. So what are you looking for in those pictures? You're trying to see what, and what does the imagery tell you?
Right.
So it's-
Which one? We're both taking pictures.
True.
So Ellie, go first.
Oh, okay. So it's an infrared image, and infrared images read the thermal heat coming off the hive. So we're reading that body heat the bees create. They actually heat the hive to maintain the eggs. Just like a bird sits on a nest, they do the same thing. So we're able to use biological concepts and measure the population on the hive because of that using these infrared images.
And the camera is more of the eyesight of the drone. So we've trained a machine learning model using 10,000 different images of flowers, and then tuning that to, say, to almond flowers, so it's able to know what to pollinate and also how to navigate around obstacles that may come in its way, such as branches.
So it sounds like, we've been talking a lot about agricultural technology, innovation that actually maybe improves upon what nature gave us. Do you think it'll ever be at the point with bees? I think you made your comments in your demo yesterday. You said that bees effectively pollinate by mistake, like it's a byproduct of what they're trying to do. If you build a pollinator that knows exactly what it's doing, somewhere down the road, can you improve on natural pollination?
Right, so obviously tech is constantly improving, and I'm going to have a few drones pollinating per acre, whereas a beehive has anywhere from 10,000 to 30,000 bees. So we're not quite there, but the technology just isn't quite there yet, but at the same time, the process that we're doing is a very natural method, and at Plan B, we're very determined to not disrupt that natural process because the plants and the insects have developed a very unique relationship over hundreds of years and thousands of years. So it's important that we keep that and not change the genetics.
And is this an area of animal health? I wish Aaron was still here, but he had a run. But I thought I remembered reading an article about how, I don't know if they were mites or some type of a bee parasite, but they figured out how to kill the parasite without killing the bees. I think it was heat-based. Is this ringing any bells?
Yeah, there's a company that will heat up the hive, and so it's hot enough to kill the mites and not the bees. So another AgTech startup, I think they're out of somewhere in the Midwest, Ohio, Pennsylvania, met them at a trade show. Yeah.
Interesting. So what are the greatest threats to bees today, and what are the greatest threats to pollination? Healthy bees, healthy pollination.
Well, one threat, if you will, is it's crazy. You go out and rent these hives, that's $500 an acre, and when you bring them in, it's cold, and nothing happens, right? So I think having some system where you can assist those bees, that's great. I don't know, as relates to other threats, seems to me if you open your checkbook and write the check to the bee man, the bees will show up if you pay his price. But
Yeah, most growers we talk to don't have a problem sourcing the beehives.
Right.
Yeah, most people are able to get them. They're just, I think, concerned that they're going to show up healthy, ready to go. I think with bees and pollination, you know, you're still dealing with a natural animal, so there's a lot of challenges there. For beekeepers, you mentioned the varroa mite. I mean, goodness, they're having to treat multiple times a year for this mite. There's just so much that can go wrong in a beehive. We cannot list them all. We would be here for like 20 more minutes.
I want to add something. I think your technology, just taking a picture of that hive and knowing kind of the strength of it, you're right. We do pay our beemen based on the strength of those hives. Right now, we're looking at the frames. So I think if I can get the bee man to agree to use this tool, I'd probably get better hives, and I would be willing to compensate more for it. Because right now, you really don't know exactly the strength of the hives other than walking around and randomly looking at these frames. So I think it'd be a great tool.
So you're paying for density, but how is like the price per hive determined? It sounds like that has been going up and continues to go up.
Well, the bee man comes in and tells you all of his woes about all the threats to bees. And then the price goes up and you pay it. Then we go out and just, okay, so there's a price per hive and it has to have an 8-frame minimum. So you open up the frames, see if there are bees on them, and and then you random samples. The worst thing, you open up a hive, there's nothing in it. The bee man doesn't like that. We don't like it. So I think if we had a sliding scale on the price of the hive based on the strength of the hive, it'd be a better program for both parties.
Right.
And there's some brokers that they'll do the inspections and they'll actually reward the beekeepers that send. I think they do like $4 for an extra frame per hive. They'll reward them for sending the stronger frames.
So let's talk for just in the few minutes we have left, let's talk a little bit about business models. And I want to understand, so are you selling to Stuart? Are you selling to the beekeepers? I think it's a service, but why don't you just explain this a little bit, and then Anna can, and I know it's early days, but how you think the business model would work.
Yeah, absolutely. So we sell directly to growers right now. We've decided to target the almond market, like Stuart, because they're spending the most on bees. It's the biggest pain. So that we're selling, we give them the infrared camera. We've always focused on let's partner with a hardware company, so our analytics and research, we can invest in that, and then we charge per scan. But we've talked to commercial beekeepers, about over 100 of them, and they told us this can actually help them cut the labor costs it takes to get the bees ready to send to Stuart. Because they want to make sure Stuart's happy and they have his business year after year, and it takes them time as well to go through the hives, move frames around, so they could be a potential customer as well. In a startup, you want to stay laser focused on one market, so we're starting in almonds, but this could help beekeepers and this could help specialty crop growers all across the country.
And Anna, are you guys at the point where do you have a pretty clear idea how you think it'll work?
We have a clear idea from talking to growers out in California. So we would be able to sell to Stuart, and we would be able to offer either a rental system or a service. Rental system, of course, it's a pretty high-tech product, so it needs to be very user-friendly, and with time, again, also takes experience to show the grower and provide examples of how it works. Or it can be a service, so you can have a multitude of these in one area, and then someone will be standing by and observing and being able to check on anything that happens. But the pricing will depend upon, of course, the type of crop, the amount of blossoms, and the level of urgency. Because if you have bad weather coming, you want to get as many blossoms pollinated before that time comes.
Okay, interesting. I think we have a question from, is that Scott in the back?
From your perspective, you cited a number of challenges for bee populations, pesticides being one of those. The neonic pesticide is particularly important to row crop production. Is there anything that you would recommend that we be aware of and implement, or is it, an acute problem that we're already doing a good job of managing?
Are you asking which one of us?
All of you.
Thank you.
Oh, man. I don't have a good answer for neonics, in all honesty. And we don't really know, good or bad, where they sit. I think Europe has gone ahead and banned them, I think, as a precautionary measure. We actually think the data we're collecting, right, we're imaging these hives while they're on the crop fields, while they're being used in fields that interact with pesticides. So we've been talking to companies that manufacture these, and the way they've explained it to us is, my customer is the specialty crop grower. It doesn't make sense to produce a pesticide that's harmful for the other input they're spending so much money on. So we think potentially this data could also help them make sure they're always innovating and creating products that contribute to food production, but also don't harm bees. But I don't have a good answer for neonics.
No. So we're like there's a two-part answer here, because the bees that we're bringing in, that we're renting, really during that period of time, the only spraying that takes place is fungicide. And those we're using more products, biologicals like regalia or what have you, I think it's Marone Bio-Innovations. So they're friendlier materials. The rest of the year, we're planting hedgerows and we're planting wildflowers and doing all this stuff to build the natural native population. And so we're sensitive to what materials we're using that are harming the native bees. We're actually supplying a lot of the almond milk trade, and our customers want to make sure that we have bee-friendly practices. So we have people out monitoring what materials we're using or not using, and we're trying to reduce anything that's harmful to bees.
We're almost out of time, but why don't we wrap it up? Why don't each of you tell us something about bees that probably most of us don't know or have any idea, and if you can tie it back to ag tech or tie it back to business, that would be great.
You want to start?
I have to think about this one.
Okay. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of good bee backs. It's just going to be half a joke. In the beehive, all the work is done by females, seriously. The males, they just eat and go clubbing, basically, is what we call it in polite terms. And so tying back to ag tech, I think it's a great example of where we're heading and where we could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, this explains why my dad used to always call me a drone.
Very good.
Yeah.
Those are the male bees.
No, I would just say, as somebody that buys a lot of bees and all this stuff, the fact that there's great minds here using technology to address issues, and with bees that I'm using in California, and you guys grew up in this state, right? I think it speaks to ag technology, and like you have a dream to do something even though you didn't grow up on an almond farm, and it's a big issue for us, I think it's a really cool thing.
Anna, you want to give it a shot as we
I'll
run
go.
out of
I'll
time
go.
here?
So going back to the hive, when bees are out foraging, they come back to the hive and they tell the female workers in the area where the best place to go is to find forage that they just discovered. And how they do it is say they know where the sun is, and then they say if it's 90 degrees, once they leave the hive, they'll direct it, and it's known as a waggle dance. Well, when two bees come back to the hive and they both have a waggle dance to two separate areas of forage, they'll essentially have a dance off.
Yeah.
And whoever does the best waggle wins. And I guess tying that back to ag tech, I think it's dancing. Yeah, we need to understand both sides, and we need to see both sides, but we also need to have a positive reaction to it and be open to new ideas.
Terrific.
Well done.
With that, we're going to wrap up the bee conversation. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
And
you, Paul.
I'm going to ask Beth Bechtel to come up to the stage, and we'll wrap this thing up.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you.